Good morning and welcome to the Daily Tanya. Today is Wednesday, the 24th day of Kislev. Tonight, of course, is the first night of Hanukkah. We're going to light the first candle. And the holiday of Hanukkah represents the light of the neshama. The light, the godly light, the miraculous light. The miracles that Hashem showed us, which came as a result of our self-sacrifice, our commitment to Hashem, and that comes from the godly soul. And that is really the topic that we're discussing in today's Tanya. We're going to learn the entire chapter 2, where the Alter Rebbe discusses what is the Nefesh Hasheni, is the second soul, the godly soul. It is a part of Hashem. So let's begin with Tzedakah. Gedoyla, Tzedakah, Shemekarev, Sageula. Tzedakah brings Mashiach closer. Make sure to put tzedakah every day. So yesterday, in chapter 1, we learned about every Jew has two souls, not one. There is the animalistic soul, the natural soul, the vivifying soul, and which is not a bad thing. It's something which the soul is basically self-centered, wants what is good for the person, and there is good and not good character traits that comes from that soul. But it's all about the selfish, what is good for me. Sometimes we realize it's good for me to be a good person also. But then the Alter Rebbe says there's also the godly soul. The godly soul is literally what Hashem put in every single Jew, a part of Hashem, and that is it's the part of the person that seeks to be holy, seeks to be godly. And that comes from the godly soul. Now, this godly soul, says the Alter Rebbe, is equally in every single Jew, no matter how holy or how lowly the person is. And the neshama comes from the very essence of Hashem, and is in every Jew. However, we do see that there are differences. Some people are holier than others. That is, the Alter Rebbe uses the example when it says we are children of Hashem, just like a child that is born from the father and the mother. And there is that part, the child, the conception of the child in the mother's womb. It takes time and it develops in 9 months, and part of the original semen, which comes from the brain of the father, part of it becomes brain, and part of it becomes other organs, until it becomes also the nails, which has very little life and very little similarity to the original brain where it comes from. And yet every part comes from that source and is still connected to the brain. Anyway, we're going to talk about this, and we're also going to explain how and why it is important to be connected to the Rebbe, to be connected to the tzaddikim, the righteous people of the generation, because they have that soul which the filtering did not affect it much. The same holiness, the way it is in the origin, and it is down here in this physical world. So let's see what the Alter Rebbe explains this beautiful chapter about the godly soul. Perek Beis, says the Alter Rebbe, "V'nefesh Hasheni is beYisrael echilek Eloka mimal mamish." The second uniquely Jewish soul is truly a part of God above. When it says mamish means truly, means also tangibly, really part of Hashem. And it brings the verse that it says in Genesis, when Hashem created the world, it says he created man, and then he blew into his nostrils the soul of life. Now, when God created the world, he created it with speech, It says Vayemer, there's 10 utterances, Yehi Or, let it be light, and so on. So the world, while the world was created with speech, the soul Hashem blew into his nostrils. There's a difference, just like when a person speaks. When you speak, you can talk and talk and talk and not get tired. But when you blow from within inside you, and then you get tired quickly. Because when you blow, you bring something from within, something deeper from you. And the same thing is the creation of the soul that Hashem created. Hashem blew into the Adam, and that soul continued, and after the sin it stopped, and then Hashem gave it to Abraham, the first Jew, and then it went on to every Jew. Says the Alter Rebbe, as it is written concerning Adam, whose soul was a comprehensive one, a neshama klalit, a general soul, and that it contained all the particular souls of subsequent generations. So it says in the Torah, and he blew into his nostrils a soul of life. And we say in the morning prayer, we say, Hashem blows it into me, the soul that you gave me. It says, Ata nefachta bi. Ve'ata nefachta bi. And as we say in a prayer concerning the soul of every individual Jew, you blew it into me. It is written in the Zohar, he who blows from within him. That is to say, from his inwardness and his innermost being. For it is of his inward and innermost vitality that a man emits through blowing with force. So the same thing is when Hashem blew it into us. It comes from within, it's deeper. So while the world was created with speech, we were created, the soul was created with the blowing of Hashem. And also it says that the neshamas of the Jewish people, they come from the thought. So that again is a deeper level than speech. So too, allegorically speaking, have Jewish souls risen in the divine thought. The Jew has his source in the divine thought, the innermost level of godliness. All other created beings, even angels, are rooted in the created by divine speech. Speech is external in comparison with thought. Continues the Alter Rebbe and says that this is why it says that the Jewish people are the firstborn son. As it is written regarding the Jewish nation, Israel is my firstborn son. And concerning Jews as individual, it says, you are children unto God your Lord. So the example that he brings, just like a child, comes from the father's brain. The same thing is the neshama, the soul of every Jew, is drawn from the thoughts, from the brain of Hashem, so to speak. That is to say, meaning the significance of the Jews being called God's child, is that just like a child is derived from the father's brain, his inner and essential being. So too, to use an anthropomorphism, is the soul of every Jew derived from God's thought and wisdom. So when we're saying God's thought and wisdom, the Alter Rebbe goes on to say what the Maimonides explains, that God's wisdom is not like human wisdom. Human wisdom is separate from the person themselves. You have the person and you have the person's wisdom. God is indivisible. We're talking about God's wisdom, it's one with God himself. And it's beyond our capacity to understand because we are human, we are thinking in realms of human. Hashem's wisdom is beyond. Says the Alter Rebbe, for he is wise. God possesses the quality of wisdom, but not with a wisdom that is known to us, created beings, because he and his wisdom are one. And as the Maimonides writes, that he is knowledge and simultaneously the knower. So, but the humans, you have the knowledge, you have the knower, and you have the subject that you know. God, by God, it's all one. The Maimonides actually continues and says that this is not within the power of any man, any human, to comprehend clearly. As it is written, can you find and understand God? By searching. And it is also written, for my thoughts are not your thoughts. So now in a side note, the Alter Rebbe says, what we just quoted the Maimonides, it says that God is one with his wisdom. There were some Kabbalists that objected to it. Says, how could you ascribe any human definitions to God? God is above wisdom altogether. Wisdom defines something. God is above definition. And Alter Rebbe explains that really they're not different. He reconciles the Maimonides and the other Kabbalists, and he says that what the Kabbalists are talking about God above any definitions, it is in the level of godliness which is before the contractions. God, in order to create the world, he contracted his light level after level until he created the world of Atzilus. We're going to be discussing this in the Tanya a lot later on. But so after the contraction of godly light, then you can ascribe to it the concept of wisdom, and still there you can say that he in his wisdom is one. But when you're talking about above Atzilus, then no description can be ascribed to Hashem. And that's what Alter Rebbe says here in the note. The Kabbalists have agreed with him that God can be described as the knowledge, the knower, and the known, as stated in Pardes of Rabbi Moshe Kodavira, even according to the Kabbalah of the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luyev, blessed memory, Maimonides' statement stands. And he explains why. This is so only when applied to the mystic principles of the clothing of the Ein Sof light, the endless light of Hashem, by means of numerous contraction, the tzimtzumim, in the vessels of the spheres of Chabad, the acronym of Chochmah Bin Das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, respectively, the triad of Sephiros, which represents divine intellect of the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation. But not higher than Atzilus. We're talking about the levels of higher than Atzilus. You cannot ascribe any definitions, cannot be defined with any of these attributes. As explained elsewhere, that Ein Sof, blessed be He, is infinitely exalted over and transcends the essence and level of Chabad, the intellectual attributes. So much so, it says, that when you're talking about the higher levels, the wisdom and actions is all the same. Again, this is something that the Rebbe explains later in Tanya, the different levels. But here he quotes us in short. In fact, the level of Chabad is regarded as being equally inferior as material action in relation to him. Thus it is written, you have made them all with wisdom. Now, wisdom doesn't make. Wisdom intellectualizes. You make with action, with hands, with feet, whatever, using action to make. But Hashem, referring to Hashem, it says that you made them with wisdom, meaning that the wisdom, even the highest level, is similar and equal to the level of action. In any case, we're going back to what we're discussing. So the Alter Rebbe said that the souls of the Jew comes from the wisdom of Hashem, which, as we explained, the wisdom and God Himself is one. So that is where the soul comes from. That was Hashem created us and blew the soul into the nostrils. And even then, when we are born with that neshama, we have that godly soul in us. So if that is the case, how come we have so many different of levels of souls? There's tens of thousands of different levels of souls, some higher, some lower. That's what Alter Rebbe is asking and is going to explain. It's true. There are myriads of different gradations of souls, ranks upon ranks, the neshamas ad infinitum. There's endless levels of different levels of souls. For example, it says, For example, the souls of the patriarchs and of Moses, our teacher, are by far superior to the souls of our own generation, which belong to the period preceding the coming of Mashiach. Calls it the Ikve Mashiach, the footsteps of Mashiach. Now the heels of Mashiach, it's called, it says, why is it called that way? Because they're just like heels, like the bottom of the foot, compared to the brain and the head. The souls of our generation compared to those souls is like the comparison between the heel and the brain. But the latter souls are like the very souls of the feet in comparison with the brain and the head. So how could we have this so many different levels? Not only that, not only is it this true when we compare the souls of our generations to Moses and the patriarchs and so on, but even in every single generation there are also many different levels of souls of people. There are those tzaddikim, the Roshei Alpha Israel, the heads of the generations, that their soul is considered like a head, like the brain compared to the feet, compared to the souls of the rest of the people. That's what Alter Rebbe said, continues with the question, Yesh Roshei Alpha Israel, shenishmeisem em b'chinas roish moyach, legabei neshamas ha'amen v'amen ha'oretz. Similarly, with each generation, we find the same disparity among neshamas. There are those who are the heads, the leaders of the multitudes of Israel, so designated because their souls are in the category of head and brain in comparison with those of the masses and the ignorant, the simple people. Likewise, there is a similar distinction between Nefashas and nefashas, the soul level of nefesh. For every soul consists of nefesh, ruach, and neshama. And again, this is later on explained in the Tanya. There's different levels in the soul itself. So the differences, the disparities is between all different levels. Says the Alter Rebbe, although all of these differences, the root and the soul of all of the neshamas are the same. מכל מקום, שרש כל הנפש, רוח הנשמה כולה, מראש כל המדרגס, עד סוף כל דרגין, המלובש בגוף עמי האורץ וקל שבקלים, נמשך ממוח העליון שהיא חוכמה אלוה כביכול. Nevertheless, the root of every nefesh, ruach, and neshama, every part of the soul, from the highest of all ranks to the lowest being those souls embodied within the simple folks and the most religiously irreverent people who couldn't care less about their soul. Still, their soul, their all are derived, as it were, from the supreme mind, which is Chachma Ilah, the supernal wisdom of Hashem. So what happens? If we all come from the same place, from the same source, how is it that there are so many differences? That's what Alter Rebbe is going to explain, that this is compared to a child that comes from the father's brain. There's the conception in the mother's womb, and then it develops, and part of it remains brain or becomes brain, and part of it becomes other organs, all the way until it becomes the nails, which has very, very little life into it. The manner of the soul's descent is analogous to a child who is derived from his father's brain. Even the nails of his feet come into existence from the very same drop of semen which comes from the father's brain. So how then were the nails created from it? And the answer is because in the mother's womb it develops and it goes through the filtering and it changes from level to level until it becomes so coarse. By being in the mother's womb for 9 months, descending degree by degree, changing continually until even the nails are formed from it. But in the same time, it's all connected to the original source, which is the father's, the drop, the semen that comes from the father's brain. Furthermore, although the drop has been altered as to become the substance of the child's nails, yet it is still bound and united in a wondrous and mighty unity with its original essence and being, namely the drop of semen as it came from the father's brain. Not only that, also the nail now in the child receives its life from the child's brain. So the part of the father's brain which becomes the child's brain, that is the source of life to the rest of the organs, including the nails. Even now, in the son, the nails receive their nourishment and life from the brain that is in his head. As it is written in the Gemara, in Nida, from the white of the father's drop of semen are formed the veins, the bones, and the nails of the child. So according to the Kabbalah too, there is a connection between the nails and the brain, as shall be presently stated. In Eitz Chaim Shara Chashmal, it is likewise stated in connection with an esoteric principle of Adam Adam's garment in the Garden of Eden, that the garments, were of nails derived from the cognitive faculty of the brain. So this is the metaphor that Rebbe uses, the example, that exactly so it is true with the souls that comes from above. The soul comes from the very brain of Hashem, so to speak, which is one with Hashem. However, the way it comes down, it is developed in different ways. There's some souls that remain brain, like the tzaddikim, and some souls have different functions. And they develop into other parts. But ultimately, we are all different parts of one body. Exactly so as it were. In the case with regard to every nefesh, ruach, and neshama in the community of Israel on high, by the souls descending degree by degree through the ishtalshelus of the worlds, the chain-like descent of the different worlds, of Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiyah, the four spiritual worlds, from God's wisdom. As it is written, ye have made them all with wisdom, with Chachma, meaning everything emanates from Chachma, which is the source of all Hishtalshelus, all descent. So from this process, all of the souls were created. Through this descent, the nefesh, ruach, and neshama, the different levels of the souls of simple folks, the simple folks and the common people, come into being. But they're all connected to the very source, which is God's wisdom, which is one with Hashem. Nevertheless, notwithstanding the fact that they have already became souls of the lower levels, the souls of the simple folk and common people, these lesser souls remain bound and united with a wonderful and mighty unity with their original essence, namely an extension of Chachma Ilah, the supernal wisdom. How so? So it says the Alter Rebbe, just like the nail receives its life through the brain, and that connects him to the original source, the same thing is the nourishment of the souls of the simple folks. They are nourished through the souls of the righteous people. The righteous people are like the brain. For the nurture and life force of the nefesh, ruach, and neshama of the simple folk are drawn from the nefesh, ruach, and neshama of the righteous and the sages and the heads of Israel in their generation. So the tzaddik connects the person. The tzaddik has such a soul that is pure and almost unfiltered, and down here and senses godliness. And through this soul, the godly soul of the righteous, all of the souls of the people connect to Hashem through them. And this says, the Alter Rebbe explains a verse, one of the commandments in the Torah. It says that one must connect to Hashem, cleave to God. The Talmud asks, how can one cleave to God? God is not human, God is not physical. How can you cleave to God? And the answer is, it is through cleaving to the righteous, to the Talmidei Chachamim, the scholars, the sages. This explains the comment of our sages on the verse that says in the Torah, and cleave unto him, concerning which the question arises, how can mortal men cleave to God? In answer, our sages comment, He who cleaves unto Torah scholars is deemed by the Torah to have actually become attached to the Shekhinah, the divine presence. Kalidei dvika. And again, this seems difficult to comprehend. How can one equate cleaving to a Torah scholar with cleaving to the Shekhinah? However, in the light of the above, this is readily understood. Why is that? So he says, "Ki alidei dvike b'tamidei chachamim kshuris nefesh ruach neshama shel ami oretz u'miyochades be'umeush zanachishain v'sharasham shebechachmei ilah." For through attachment to the scholars, the nefesh ruach and neshama of the simple folks are bound up and united with their original essence and the root in the supernal wisdom, shehu yisborach v'chachmasei echad v'amad echula, and thereby with God Himself, since He and His wisdom are one, and He is the knowledge, etc. What we said before. Now, what about people who don't believe in it? They don't know it, or they don't believe in it, and they don't cleave to the sages. How do they get their spiritual nourishment? So the Alter Rebbe says, regardless whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not, everyone receives their spiritual nourishment through their sages, through the scholars, the leaders, the tzaddikim. Except that if you're not doing it consciously, and especially if one goes against the sages, the nourishment that they receive is a very external nourishment. It is like giving something from the back. When you do it consciously and willingly, lovingly, then you receive much greater, deeper internal connection through the tzaddik connecting to Hashem. That's what Alter Rebbe continues. As for those who willfully sin and rebel against the Torah sages, how do they receive their spiritual nurture and life? Spiritual life and nurture flow only where there is a desire to nurture and give life. So in answer to this, the Alter Rebbe continues and says, "Yenikas nefesh ruach and neshama shalem mibchinas achayraim shel nefesh ruach v'nishmas tamidei chachamim." The nurture of their nefesh ruach and neshama comes from the hint part, as it were, of the nefesh ruach and neshama of the scholars. So that's why we understand the importance of connecting to the tzaddik, because our souls connect to the tzaddik, through the tzaddik, being that the tzaddik is on such a high level and openly and sensitive to godliness, so that also connects us. There was once some students came to the Rebbe. They asked, "What is the mission? What is the function of a Rebbe, of a tzaddik?" And the Rebbe gave them the example. It says that when you have, every person is like a light bulb. A light bulb needs the energy to light, to make sure that it shines. Now the energy comes through the wires that is connected to the generator, connected to the original, the source of the energy. However, you need to have the switch to turn it on and make that connection. And the Rebbe is the one that shows you where the switch is, to turn on the switch and able to connect your soul to the neshama, to the source, which is Hashem. So now the Alter Rebbe continues and explains something else. In addition to the fact that we have a soul, the soul comes down to this world, and the soul comes also in garments. In order for the soul to be sensitive, so it's one thing to connect to the Rebbe, to the tzaddik, but there's also the garments of the soul that conceals the soul and does not allow it to sense. And these garments that we have is affected by the way when the parents, when they conceive the child, if they have positive thoughts, good, holy thoughts, that's why it's important for the mother to go to the mikveh and purify herself, and while being together intimately, to have positive thoughts, holy thoughts, and that makes sure that the child has a more sensitive garment to the soul. That's what the Rebbe continues here. As for what is written in the Zohar and in the Zohar Chodesh, that the essential factor is to conduct oneself in a holy manner during sexual union, which is not the case with the children of the simple folks and their ilk, who do not conduct themselves thus. So, in other words, we're talking about the different levels of souls that come to the people. Here we say it depends on the actual union of the father and the mother. So the Rebbe explains that this is talking about the garment of the soul. This is because no nefesh ruach neshama is without a garment, which stems from the nefesh of its father and mother's essence. All of the commandments that it fulfills are influenced by that garment. It is through this garment that the soul achieves its ability to affect the body and to perform the commandments involving physical matters. Even the benevolence that flow to one from heaven is all given through this garment, because the soul is so strongly bound up with this garment. The Zohar refers to the garment in this context as the person's soul. So, now, if the person sanctifies himself, he will bring forth a holy garment for the neshama of this child, thereby enabling the child to serve God more readily. However great a soul it may be, it still needs the father's sanctification at the time of intercourse. But this is true about the garment, but the soul itself, says the Alter Rebbe, it could be a very high soul coming to a person who is in a very low level. In fact, we know there's the souls of great holy people came and they were born into people who are not Jewish, and they converted. Because when a person converts, that means that the soul was there all along. But the soul itself, as distinct from its garment, is not affected by the parent's sanctification. In fact, it sometimes happens that the soul of an infinitely lofty person comes to be the son of an ignoble and lowly person. All this has been explained by the Rabbi of blessed memory in Likutei on Parshas Vayera and in Time HaMitzvahs on Parshas Bereshis. Thus, the physical world of which the parents are a part can in no way affect the soul's spiritual rank. The rank is the rank of the soul, whatever it is, no matter how low the father and mother are. Even the statement of the Zohar that the essential factor regarding the state of the soul is the holy manner of conduct during the sexual union pertains only to the soul's garment. The soul itself, with all its various levels, emanates from above. And this is the end of today's chapter. explaining the godly soul. Whatever we do, the godly mitzvahs, everything what we do is affected by the godly soul. And now the Rebbe is going to go on and explain each of these souls, the animals and the godly soul, what are the faculties that it has, and what is the challenges that we have, and how do we deal with those challenges, that we'll learn in the upcoming chapters. Have a wonderful day and a happy Hanukkah. All the best.